bid to stave off tariffs, Justin Trudeau spoke with Donald Trump on Sunday about Canada's border plan, but that conversation doesn't seem to have made much of a difference.
Recent events have triggered a dramatic shift between the United States and Canada, one that's sending shockwaves through energy markets, manufacturing industries, and global trade relations. The European Union and Japan are stepping in to replace the United States, leaving policymakers scrambling to respond. What does this mean for you? Will prices skyrocket? Could this be the beginning of an economic realignment? And why is Canada making this move now? Stay with us as we uncover the full story behind this historic shift. What's happening? Most people do not realize it yet, but Canada just pulled off a move that could change global trade forever. For decades, Canada relied on the United States as its primary trade partner, with nearly 80% of its exports directed south of the border. This deep economic interconnection made the two nations almost inseparable in global commerce. However, a dramatic shift has been unfolding, and now Canada is moving in a new direction, forging alliances that could reshape the balance of power in international trade. For years, Canada benefited from an open trade relationship with the United States, secured by agreements like the North American Free Trade Agreement and later the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement. These agreements allowed goods to flow seamlessly between the two nations, creating economic stability and interdependence. But then something changed. A series of geopolitical events, trade disputes, and policy shifts created an environment of uncertainty that forced Canada to reconsider its long-standing reliance on the United States. At the heart of this shift is all the waves of tariffs imposed by the United States, particularly by President Donald Trump. His administration introduced sweeping tariffs on Canadian steel, aluminum, and other key exports under the guise of national security. This move sent shockwaves through Canada's economy and signaled that its biggest trading partner could no longer be counted on for stability. Rather than retaliate in a prolonged trade war, Canada made a strategic decision. It began diversifying its trade relationships. In addition to trade tensions, political uncertainty in the United States played a major role in Canada's shift. Inconsistent policies, changing leadership, and an increasing trend toward protectionism made long-term trade planning with the United States more difficult. The unpredictability of tariffs, shifting energy policies, and the threat of further economic restrictions left Canada with no choice but to seek more stable and predictable trade agreements elsewhere. This was not just about responding to tariffs, it was about creating a long-term strategy that would shield Canada's economy from external shocks. Canada realized that relying too heavily on a single trade partner put its industries at risk. A single policy shift in Washington, District of Columbia, could send ripples across Canada's economy, affecting everything from energy exports to agriculture. To mitigate this risk, Canada accelerated its efforts to build stronger relationships with other global economic powers. And here is where things get even more interesting. Canada is not just leaving, it is upgrading. By seeking new trade alliances, Canada is positioning itself as a key player in a new multipolar trade environment. Its strategic realignment is not only about survival, it is about taking advantage of new opportunities that could enhance its global economic influence. The shift is already bearing fruit as Canada establishes deeper economic ties with Europe and Asia, securing a more diversified and resilient economic future. Why Europe chose Canada over the United States. The European Union just turned away from United States energy, and Canada stepped in at the perfect moment. The geopolitical landscape shifted dramatically after the invasion of Ukraine, forcing European nations to reconsider their energy dependencies. Before the conflict, the European Union relied heavily on Russia for its natural gas supply, with nearly half of its imports coming from Russian sources. This dependency created a vulnerability that became painfully evident when geopolitical tensions escalated. Determined to break away from Russian energy reliance, the European Union sought alternative sources. Initially, the United States stepped in to fill the gap, increasing its liquefied natural gas exports to Europe. However, political uncertainty in the United States, coupled with shifting trade policies, made European leaders hesitant to rely on Washington, District of Columbia, as a long-term solution. The risk of tariffs, changing diplomatic relations, and fluctuating energy policies created a need for a more stable partner. Canada emerged as the ideal alternative. Unlike the United States, Canada provided a stable and politically reliable energy supply, free from the unpredictable trade disputes that had plagued United States relations. The Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, implemented in 2017, had already set the foundation for strong trade relations between Canada and the European Union. Since its introduction, bilateral trade had surged by 66%, demonstrating the viability of a long-term economic partnership. Beyond stability, energy, Canada offered logistical advantages that made it an even more attractive trade partner for Europe. The country's extensive natural gas reserves, along with infrastructure projects like the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion, positioned Canada as a key player in the global energy market. European leaders recognized that Canada's commitment to renewable energy development and environmentally responsible resource extraction aligned with the European Union's sustainability goals, further strengthening the case for deeper trade relations. And this is not just about energy. Canada and the European Union are forming an economic superpower that extends beyond fuel and commodities. The two economies are increasingly integrated, expanding cooperation in sectors like technology, automotive manufacturing, and pharmaceuticals. With Europe actively reducing its dependence on both Russia and the United States, Canada has stepped up to fill the void, securing a future as a crucial economic partner on the global stage. Japan's bold power move. Japan just sealed a deal that could shift the global energy market forever. Faced with mounting energy security concerns, Japan has been aggressively seeking new suppliers to reduce its dependence on coal and fossil fuel imports from unstable regions. Historically, Japan relied heavily on energy imports from the Middle East and, to some extent, the United States. However, increasing costs, geopolitical tensions, and supply chain risks made diversification a necessity. Canada provided Japan with the perfect solution. With its vast liquefied natural gas reserves and the ability to supply energy without the political instability that plagued Middle Eastern markets, Canada became Japan's preferred energy supplier. The geographic proximity between the two nations also made Canadian energy exports a more cost-effective and logistically efficient option than sourcing from the United States or other global suppliers. This agreement was about more than just energy security. Japan saw an opportunity to lock in long-term supply agreements with a nation that shared similar economic and environmental priorities. Unlike the United States, which had been unpredictable in its trade policies, Canada offered long-term stability, making it the more attractive partner. With this deal, Japan ensured a steady and reliable source of liquefied natural gas while simultaneously strengthening its economic ties with Canada. This deal was not just about energy, it was part of a much bigger strategy that the United States was not ready for. As Japan secured a major energy partner, it also deepened its economic alliance with Canada in industries like automotive manufacturing, technology, and infrastructure. With Japan's energy transition moving full speed ahead, the role of the United States in the region's energy supply chain has diminished, further reshaping global trade dynamics. The hidden economic consequences. The United States is not just losing a trade partner, it is about to feel the economic pain where it hurts the most. The shift in Canada's trade strategy is having immediate consequences, particularly in industries that relied on Canadian exports. The energy sector is feeling the first wave of impact as the United States faces rising fuel costs due to reduced access to Canadian oil and natural gas. Beyond energy, key manufacturing industries are struggling with supply chain disruptions. Steel, automotive, and agriculture sectors, which depended on a steady flow of Canadian materials, are now forced to seek alternative sources, often at higher costs. As prices rise, consumers in the United States are beginning to feel the effects, with increased costs for fuel, vehicles, and essential goods. But here's the real problem. This is not just about Canada. The whole world is watching. Other nations are taking note of the economic realignment, and the United States is losing its once dominant position as the go-to trade partner. With Canada leading the way, a new era of global trade alliances is emerging, leaving Washington, District of Columbia, scrambling to adapt to a shifting economic landscape. Trump's trade war, the moment that pushed Canada over the edge. Trump thought tariffs would strengthen the United States. Instead, they pushed Canada out the door. The trade tensions between the United States and Canada did not emerge overnight. They were the result of a series of escalating policies, particularly those introduced under the leadership of President Donald Trump. His administration's decision to impose heavy tariffs on steel, aluminum, and oil imports from Canada set the stage for a significant shift in North American trade dynamics. Initially, the tariffs were framed as a necessary measure to protect domestic industries and reduce trade imbalances. However, the unpredictability of these policies had unintended consequences, leading Canada to reassess its economic reliance on its closest neighbor. The Canadian government quickly realized that maintaining strong ties with the United States came with increasing risks, especially when trade agreements could be dismantled with little warning. Instead of continuing to battle these ongoing disputes, Canada chose to diversify its trade relationships, seeking partners that offered more stability and long-term commitments. What followed was a quiet but strategic withdrawal from economic dependence on the United States. Canada expanded its energy exports to other markets, negotiated new trade agreements, and reinforced its economic alliances outside North America. Meanwhile, as Canada's economy adapted, the United States found itself grappling with the unintended consequences of its trade war. Manufacturing costs soared, businesses struggled to secure reliable supplies, and the agricultural sector faced unexpected losses. And now the United States is scrambling to undo the damage, but it might be too late. How Canada and the European Union are creating an economic superpower. Could Canada actually join the European Union? Some leaders think it is possible. The economic relationship between Canada and the European Union has deepened significantly in recent years, driven in part by the shifting global trade landscape. The Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, implemented as a formal trade deal, provided the foundation for a thriving partnership that has only grown stronger as the United States has become an increasingly unreliable ally. The agreement eliminated tariffs on a vast range of products, facilitating the smooth exchange of goods and services between Canada and European nations. Over time, this trade framework evolved beyond mere commerce, with European Union officials openly advocating for deeper integration with Canada. Some leaders have even suggested that Canada could become a semi-integrated member of the European economic system, further reducing its dependence on the United States. This alignment poses a serious challenge to the traditional influence of the United States in global trade. If Canada continues strengthening ties with the European Union, the economic and political implications could be profound. The United States has long relied on its geographical advantage to maintain dominant trade relationships with Canada. However, as Canada finds success in diversifying its partnerships, that influence is beginning to wane. China's silent win, why it is secretly benefiting from the United States-Canada split. As the United States and Canada clash, there is one country sitting back and gaining power: China. While the United States has been preoccupied with trade wars and shifting alliances, China has been quietly strengthening its economic ties with Canada. As Canada moves away from reliance on its southern neighbor, China has seized the opportunity to secure valuable resources, particularly in the energy sector. China's demand for oil and natural gas has skyrocketed, and Canada has stepped in to meet that demand. The strategic expansion of Canadian energy exports to China has not only given Canada a more stable customer base, but has also provided China with a crucial alternative to imports from other regions facing geopolitical instability. In addition, China has invested heavily in Canadian infrastructure projects, ensuring that energy flows efficiently from North America to Asian markets. Beyond energy, China sees an opportunity to influence Canada's economic policies. By becoming one of Canada's most significant trade partners, China gains leverage in negotiations, positioning itself as an essential ally in Canada's economic future. While Canada has remained cautious in balancing its alliances, the growing trade partnership with China could have long-term consequences, especially as diplomatic tensions between the United States and China continue to escalate. And if the United States does not act fast, this could permanently shift the balance of global trade. What this means for the average American. Think this is just about governments. Think again, this trade war is about to hit your wallet. For many people in the United States, trade policies and international economic shifts may seem like distant concerns. However, the impact of Canada's departure from its traditional trade relationship with the United States is already being felt in everyday life. Fuel prices have begun to rise. Driven by reduced energy imports from Canada, the United States has long benefited from affordable Canadian oil and gas. But as Canada prioritizes exports to other nations, domestic prices are climbing. Higher fuel costs translate into increased transportation expenses, affecting everything from the cost of goods at the supermarket to airline ticket prices. The manufacturing sector is also facing new challenges. With Canada shifting its trade alliances, access to raw materials such as steel and aluminum has become more expensive. This increase in production costs is being passed down to consumers, making essential products such as vehicles and household appliances more costly. The employment market is experiencing ripple effects as well. Industries that previously depended on smooth trade with Canada, including agriculture, automotive manufacturing, and energy production, are experiencing instability. Job losses are becoming a growing concern, particularly in regions that heavily rely on cross-border commerce. Perhaps the most concerning aspect is the uncertainty surrounding the future of United States-Canada economic relations. While efforts to repair trade partnerships may be underway, the reality is that Canada has already built strong alternative networks. Even if negotiations take place, it is unlikely that Canada will return to the same level of dependence on the United States that once defined their economic relationships. And the worst part? This is just the beginning. Is this the end of United States trade dominance? The global trade landscape is undergoing a seismic shift, and at the heart of it lies a question that few dared to ask until now. Is the United States losing its decades-long dominance over international trade? Canada's recent trade realignment is not an isolated incident, but rather a symptom of a much broader transformation. The once unshakable position of the United States as the world's economic leader is being challenged like never before. For over a century, the United States held its status as the anchor of the global economy. It dictated trade policies, set financial standards, and maintained an intricate web of economic alliances. The North American Free Trade Agreement, later replaced by the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, exemplified how deeply integrated North American trade had become. Yet, Canada's decision to shift its economic focus away from the United States marks a clear departure from the traditional trade order. The turning point was not a single event, but a culmination of factors. The unpredictability of United States trade policies under the leadership of various administrations led to uncertainty among its closest allies. Tariffs, regulatory disputes, and threats of trade restrictions made Canada and other nations reconsider their reliance on the United States market. Meanwhile, the European Union, China, and emerging economic powers in South America and Asia saw an opportunity. As Canada sought stability and long-term security in its trade partnerships, these nations welcomed the shift with open arms. The European Union's trade agreements with Canada flourished, strengthening economic bonds that bypassed the United States entirely. Japan similarly deepened its energy partnerships with Canada, securing vital resources without the complications of dealing with the shifting policies of the United States government. At the core of this transformation is the changing perception of the United States as a trade partner, where once it was seen as the ultimate economic powerhouse, now many nations view it as unpredictable, protectionist, and less reliable. Canada's pivot away from the United States is more than a trade shift. It is a warning sign. If other nations follow suit, the global trade order could be permanently altered. The question remains, can the United States adapt to this new reality, or is it on a trajectory toward further isolation? The decisions made in the coming years will determine whether the United States can regain its influence or if it will be left behind in an evolving economic landscape. How regional trade blocs are replacing the United States. The rise of regional trade blocs is redefining the global economy, gradually diminishing the central role the United States once played. As Canada, the European Union, Japan, and other nations seek stability and predictability in their trade agreements, a new pattern is emerging, one where regional partnerships take precedence over reliance on a single dominant economy. Canada's increasing alignment with the European Union and Japan is a prime example of this shift. The comprehensive economic and trade agreement between Canada and the European Union laid the foundation for a strong trade alliance, removing tariffs on key goods and encouraging investment across multiple industries. The agreement not only strengthened Canada's economic ties with Europe, but also positioned the European Union as an attractive alternative to the United States market. Beyond Canada, other nations are adopting similar strategies. The Association of Southeast Asian Nations, which includes powerhouse economies such as Indonesia, Malaysia, and Vietnam, is becoming a major force in global trade. Meanwhile, the South American economic bloc, Mercosur, has intensified trade negotiations with the European Union and Asian markets, further diminishing the influence of the United States. The motivation behind this trend is clear. Regional blocs offer stability, predictability, and mutually beneficial agreements that bypass the volatility of United States trade policies. Nations are prioritizing long-term economic security over historical alliances, and the shift is accelerating. One of the most significant consequences of this new trade order is the gradual decline of the United States dollar's dominance in global transactions. As countries turn to regional agreements, they are increasingly conducting trade in local currencies or alternative financial systems, reducing dependence on the United States financial infrastructure. The rise of digital currencies and alternative payment mechanisms only further accelerates this transition. For the United States, this shift presents a crucial challenge. If regional trade blocs continue to expand at their current pace, the United States could find itself on the sidelines of major economic developments. The traditional approach of leveraging economic dominance to dictate trade terms is becoming less effective, forcing the United States to rethink its global strategy. The path forward is uncertain, but one thing is clear: regional trade blocs are reshaping the future of global commerce, and the United States must decide whether to adapt or risk being left behind. Mexico steps up. Could it replace the United States as Canada's top partner? The trade landscape in North America is undergoing a dramatic transformation. With Canada actively diversifying its economic alliances, Mexico has emerged as a key contender for deeper trade ties. Historically, the United States has been Canada's largest trading partner, but recent shifts in policy, tariffs, and economic uncertainty have prompted Canada to seek alternative markets. Mexico offers a compelling proposition. The North American Trade Agreement has long facilitated trade between these nations, but with Canada's move away from the United States, Mexico stands to benefit immensely. The country boasts a rapidly growing industrial sector, skilled labor, and proximity that makes trade logistics smoother than dealing with overseas markets. For Canada, strengthening ties with Mexico presents an opportunity to maintain supply chain efficiencies while reducing reliance on the United States. In sectors such as automotive manufacturing, agriculture, and technology, Mexico's expanding economy is well positioned to absorb and support Canadian exports. At the same time, Mexico's energy sector, particularly its demand for liquefied natural gas, could provide Canada with another lucrative avenue to compensate for declining energy trade with the United States. However, challenges remain. Mexico must ensure its infrastructure, regulatory frameworks, and energy resources can handle increased trade volumes. Additionally, the geopolitical landscape is unpredictable. While Mexico and Canada may seek to deepen their economic relationship, the influence of the United States will still loom large. What happens next hinges on how quickly Mexico can capitalize on Canada's pivot and whether the two nations can formalize stronger trade agreements that offer long-term stability. If successful, this shift could significantly alter the balance of economic power in North America, creating a new dynamic where Mexico and Canada strengthen ties while the United States grapples with the consequences of losing a crucial trade partner. Europe versus America, who will win the battle for Canadian trade? As Canada reconfigures its trade priorities, two major economic powerhouses stand poised to benefit: the European Union and the United States. The question now is, which will emerge as Canada's dominant trade ally? The European Union has been making strategic moves to secure a larger share of Canada's trade portfolio. The Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, which has been in effect for several years, has already streamlined trade between Canada and the European bloc. European nations have actively sought to replace the United States as Canada's primary trade partner, particularly in key sectors such as energy, technology, and manufacturing. For the European Union, Canada represents not only a valuable source of raw materials, such as liquefied natural gas and minerals, but also a stable and reliable partner in an increasingly uncertain global economy. With ongoing geopolitical tensions and the need for diversified trade routes, European leaders view Canada as a cornerstone in their economic strategy. Meanwhile, the United States is struggling to maintain its trade dominance. Economic policies, protectionist tariffs, and unpredictable political shifts have created instability, causing Canadian businesses to explore alternative markets. While the geographical and historical ties between the United States and Canada are strong, businesses are prioritizing reliability and long-term security over traditional alliances. A key battleground in this trade competition is energy. The European Union is aggressively pursuing Canadian liquefied natural gas exports to reduce reliance on Russian energy, while the United States faces the risk of losing access to Canada's vast natural resources. At the same time, Canadian businesses are increasingly drawn to European technology partnerships, research collaborations, and investment opportunities, which further strengthen Canada's ties to the continent. However, the United States still holds leverage. Its massive consumer market, existing supply chains, and economic influence mean that Canada cannot afford to cut ties completely. The challenge for the United States is to rebuild trust, create more favorable trade policies, and re-establish itself as Canada's most reliable partner. As the competition between the European Union and the United States intensifies, Canada finds itself in an advantageous position. By strategically balancing trade relationships, Canada can leverage its growing partnerships with Europe while keeping options open with the United States. But what do you think? Let's know in the comments. Thanks for watching.